From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Reaction appears mixed to a recent United States Supreme Court decision on affirmative action in university admissions. Affirmative action in admissions means that schools give special consideration to some racial or ethnic minorities. The goal is to create a more diverse campus and to give more opportunities to groups that are underrepresented in higher education. The Supreme Court ruled that race can be one of many factors considered when a student applies to a college or university. The court said education benefits from having diverse student populations. Some legal experts thought the justices would strike down a 2003 Supreme Court ruling. That ruling let universities use race in admissions decisions, but as just one factor among others. In the new decision, the justices did not deal with the question of affirmative action itself. Instead, the justices sent the case back to a lower court for further consideration. A white woman who had been denied admission to the University of Texas at Austin brought the case. Abigail Fisher argued that it was wrong to reject her when minority students with similar grades and test scores were accepted because of affirmative action. Wade Henderson is president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. He said the new decision confirms that race can be a factor in admissions. Ada Malloy is with the nonprofit American Council on Education. She says many schools do not generally give special consideration to race or ethnicity of applicants. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. The Afghan Youth Orchestra performed in the United States in February. 48 young musicians traveled from Kabul to play at some of the most famous American music halls. They performed at the Kennedy Center in Washington and Carnegie Hall in New York City. The last stop was Boston, Massachusetts, where they performed at the New England Conservatory of Music. The musicians perform versions of Western classical compositions and also traditional Afghan music. Violins and trumpets played along with the rubab and a sitar in a performance of Bolero by Maurice Ravel. The State Department and the United States Embassy in Kabul funded most of the trip. Secretary of State John Kerry called the young musicians ambassadors of peace. Afghanistan's former Taliban rulers banned music when they took power in 1996. Also, under the Taliban, girls were not permitted to be educated after the age of 8. Today, music is studied and played freely in Afghanistan. The musicians in the orchestra are male and female, and between the ages of 10 22. Most are orphans or were homeless. Ahmad Sarmast started the orchestra. A few years ago, he founded the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Kabul. The youth orchestra developed from that school. Ahmad Sarmast says he is very pleased with the accomplishments in such a short time. He says the idea of the trip was to change the way people view Afghanistan. The children, he says, are ambassadors of Afghan culture, whose efforts reflect the changes in their country in the last 10 years. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. American educators plan to launch 50 new schools in Kenya. The new schools of Bridge International Academies are set to open in January, at the beginning of Kenya's school year. The goal of the private group is to educate children of families who make $2 a day or less. They opened their first school in Kenya in 2009. Since then, the number of schools has increased to 200. Bridge officials Shannon May, Jay Kimmelman, and Phil Fry say they want to educate 10 million children around the world. On the Bridge International Academy's website, the three friends say their effort began with a question. They asked why there were no plans to educate all the world's poorest children. They expect their early education business to make a profit, even though it is designed for very poor areas. Their low-cost plan uses new technology to help teachers and to follow student progress. It also tracks operations in each school. They call this new system Academy in a Box. Every Bridge teacher uses a Nook e-reader. The electronic reader provides teachers with daily lessons. The school provides students with books that match the electronic lessons. The lessons have been developed by trained educators for all Bridge International Academy's classes. The lessons are designed to meet the requirements of Kenya's National Education Plan. Bridge's large class sizes and teaching methods are not usual in the schools of developed countries. They are not considered the best for learning. Yet, supporters say the Bridge operation compares well with public education in Kenya. The average cost to attend a Bridge school is about $5 a month. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Current and former students from Berklee College of Music in Boston recently returned to the United States after 3 weeks in Kenya. They were part of a cultural exchange program aiming to influence lives through music. They taught music, performed and donated instruments to a Kenyan community center. They also learned about traditional Kenyan music. Music is an important part of life in Kenya. Sam Lutomia works for the Berklee College of Music, but he was born and spent his early years in Kenya. He helped to create a group called Global Youth Groove. Its goal is to bring Western music to young Kenyans and get them to consider music as a career. Mr. Lutomia says he started talking with Berkeley students and teachers, and they all liked the idea. Then they started collecting musical instruments. 13 Americans made the trip to Kenya in July. They included 4 high school students from the Boston area. The first stop was Nairobi. There, they got a chance to meet with local musicians and listen to them play. Project coordinator Aaron Culverson says the American group presented a gift during a visit to Kakamega in western Kenya. The gift included about 20 instruments, some recorders, and an entire drum kit. The Americans also gave out laptop computers and recording software. Many Kenyans attended the activities offered by the group. One Berkeley student, David Chapman, said for some of the Kenyans, it was the first time to see and touch such instruments. Aaron Culverson says music can give someone a sense of power. When you put music in front of children, he says, it seems that their minds open up. Music gives them a chance to express themselves through songs and writing the songs. The Americans also performed at a national music festival. During the trip, Aaron Culverson says they met with local musicians and listened to them play. They also learned about traditional Kenyan instruments, dances, and songs. Trip organizer Sam Lutomia says he is happy with the levels of energy the exchange program has produced. He hopes the trip will take place every year and expand to neighboring countries. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn English and stay informed every day from your computer or mobile device at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Stephen Weinberger is the Director of Linguistics in the English Department at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Students in his beginning phonetics class are mostly interested in teaching English as a second language. They wanted to study how non-native speakers pronounce different sounds. So we sent the students out to record non-native speakers, and we compared those speakers to each other and to native speakers of English. Professor Weinberger wrote a 69-word paragraph for all of the speakers to read. The paragraph uses common words, but contains almost all of the sounds used in English. Here it is. Please call Stella. Ask her to bring these things with her from the store. 6 spoons of fresh snow peas, 5 thick slabs of blue cheese, and maybe a snack for her brother Bob. We also need a small plastic snake and a big toy frog for the kids. She can scoop these things into 3 red bags, and we will go meet her Wednesday at the train station. In 1999, Professor Weinberger put the recordings online. The Speech Accent Archive is for anyone who wants to compare and analyze the accents of different English speakers. Some people think the archive would be better if it included natural speech, people talking freely, not just reading the same words. Professor Weinberger recognizes the strengths and weaknesses of his site. The biggest plus, of course, is that it is so uniform that you can immediately compare a Kiswahili speaker to a native English speaker. But the downside is that a less than skilled reader will have difficulties with the paragraph that might not demonstrate their true phonetic abilities. People often use sounds from their first language until they can reproduce the ones used in the language they are learning. Professor Weinberger says the site gets 1 million visits a month. We get notices from speech pathologists, from computational engineers who do speech processing, from PhD students who want to do research on bias and accent judgments, from actors who need to learn a special part. The archive contains more than 1,500 recordings. Professor Weinberger would like more people to send in their own samples. There are about 6,000 languages in the world today. The archive only has samples from about 350 of them. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. This week on our program, we answer a question from Japan. A listener named Maki would like to know if the test known as the TOEIC is popular in the United States. TOEIC is the test of English for international communication. It measures the ability of people to communicate in the workplace using everyday English. The Educational Testing Service in Princeton, New Jersey, develops and administers the TOEIC. It says more than 9,000 organizations use the test in more than 90 countries. Each year, the TOEIC is taken in the United States about 20,000 times. So how popular does that make it? Well, consider that last year the test was given more than 5 million times worldwide. Non-native English speakers take the test to demonstrate their English skills when seeking a new job or a promotion. Some organizations use the TOEIC to measure progress in English training programs and as a placement test. The cost of the test is set locally in each country. The TOEIC is really two tests. People can take one or both of them. One is a paper and pencil test. It measures listening and reading skills. The other test is given on a computer. It measures speaking and writing skills. 11 questions on the computer test require speaking. For example, the test taker is asked to read out loud or describe a picture. 8 other questions require written answers, including an opinion essay. We visited the ETS website for more information about the TOEIC, but one of the first things we saw was a warning about a phishing scam. A phishing scam is a kind of crime that uses email to trick people into providing financial or other personal information. In this case, the emails claim to be from the Educational Testing Service. Spokeswoman Christine Bettinelli advises people taking the TOEIC to be suspicious of any emails claiming to be from ETS. They should be especially suspicious of messages that ask for information that they have already provided for the test. The spokeswoman says if you get an email you are not sure about, forward it or send a separate message to contactets@ets.org. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. You can learn more about English language tests from our Foreign Student Series at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find transcripts, podcasts, and captioned videos of our reports, and post comments and questions.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Last time, we talked about massive open online courses, also called MOOCs. Tens of thousands, or even more people, can take these classes all at once. You can be anywhere in the world to take a MOOC. All you need is a computer and a network connection. MOOCs add to a tradition of what is known as distance learning. For years, many colleges have offered classes that are taught partly or mostly online. MOOCs are available in subjects like computer science, engineering, or mechanics. Can MOOCs in subjects like arts or the humanities be as effective? Scott Anderson teaches philosophy at the University of British Columbia in Canada. He sees both good and bad sides to online courses. Mr. Anderson believes that some parts are fine. For example, when a teacher gives a presentation to the class, there is no special reason why students need to be physically present to hear it. And he says there is no reason why they need to be physically present to do readings. Mr. Anderson says increased numbers of people taking MOOCs can mean less communication between students and teachers. He says two ways to deal with this are by adding more teachers and graders and setting up online discussion groups. Lisa Jadwin teaches English and American literature and writing at St. John Fisher College in New York. She says online education has some weaknesses for her subjects. She says the teaching of literature requires face-to-face interaction. Professor Jadwin says some students could learn well from presentations and reading assignments, blogs, and discussion groups. But she believes that hybrid courses work best. She describes hybrids as mixing face-to-face course elements with computer-aided teaching and writing projects. Bill Pogue teaches communications at the University of Houston downtown. He says that after leading classes for more than 30 years, he would not attempt to teach a MOOC. However, Mr. Pogue sees good value in online education. He noted a strong sense of community in an online course he once took. He says the students work together on a project while living on 4 continents. He says this would be hard to repeat in a traditional classroom or face-to-face setting. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. Get more education news and learn English at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A class with tens or even hundreds of thousands of students might sound like a teacher's bad dream. But a big idea in higher education these days is the massive open online course, or MOOC. Some universities offer free non-credit MOOCs available to anyone in the world. Others charge for courses and provide credits. The idea is still developing. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology recently started its first MOOC. The school plans to offer many free non-credit courses through a project called MITx. So far, most massive open online courses are in computer science, technology, mechanics, and engineering. For example, students around the world are taking a free course called Building a Computer Search Engine. Two computer scientists, Sebastian Trun and David Evans, are offering this course through Udacity.com. Mr. Evans is on leave from the University of Virginia. Mr. Trun is a Stanford research professor and a Google Fellow best known for his work on a driverless car. For 6 weeks, the students watch short videos and then take informal quizzes. Mr. Evans says the quizzes are part of the lecture to keep students engaged and keep them thinking. The quizzes are not graded, and students can try them as often as they want, whenever they want. They can also watch the videos repeatedly. Students receive homework and join online groups to exchange questions and answers about the course. The teachers hold virtual office hours to answer questions that the students have voted to send them. They also present their own questions and observations. The students take a final examination to show where they rate in the class. Everyone who finishes the course receives a grade and proof of completion. Top students get letters documenting their work. Mr. Trun started Udacity, which supports free MOOCs. Udacity hopes to make a profit in the future by connecting possible employers with interested students. On his Stanford homepage, he says he wants to democratize education. Education, he says, should be free, accessible for all, everywhere, and anytime. David Evans says online courses can deliver high-quality education to many more students at much lower cost, but he recognizes the limits. His hope, he says, is that the best traditional universities will be able to focus on the things they can do really well that can't be done better through an online university. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Some students get so nervous before a test, they do poorly, even if they know the material. Sion Bylock is a psychology professor at the University of Chicago in Illinois. She has studied these highly anxious test takers. She says students might even start worrying about whether this exam is going to prevent them from getting into the college they want. She says when students worry, they use up attention and memory resources that could be used on the test. Professor Bylock and another researcher Gerardo Ramirez, have developed a possible solution. Just before an exam, highly anxious test takers spend 10 minutes writing about their worries about the test. She said when students write about their worries on paper, they think about the worst that could happen. They might realize it is not as bad as they thought it was. And writing about it prevents these thoughts from popping up when they are taking the test. The researchers tested the idea on a group of 20 anxious college students. They gave them 2 short math tests. After the first one, they asked the students to either sit quietly or write about their feelings about the upcoming second test. The researchers added to the pressure. They told the students that those who did well on the second test would get money. They also told them that their performance would affect other students as part of a team effort. Professor Bylock says those who sat quietly scored an average of 12% worse on the second test. But the students who had written about their fears improved their performance by an average of 5%. Next, the researchers used younger students in a biology class. They told them before final exams either to write about their feelings or to think about things unrelated to the test. Professor Bylock says highly anxious students who did the writing got an average grade of B+, compared to a B- for those who did not. But what if students do not have a chance to write about their fears immediately before an exam or presentation? Professor Bylock says students can try it themselves at home or in the library and still improve their performance. The researchers wrote about their findings in the journal Science. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Tell us how you deal with anxiety before a big event. Share your comments at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Songs teach language. Consider a song like Tom's Diner by Suzanne Vega. An American teaching English overseas once told us that students love that song. Recently, we asked people on the Special English Facebook page to suggest other songs that English learners might like. Noemi Nito wrote, "I'm one of those English students who love Tom's Diner. I started learning English with Lemon Tree by Fool's Garden. Another favorite is Truly Madly Deeply by Savage Garden." Another person, Asi Tambunan, suggested the song God Only Knows by Orianthi. Yongi Yako wrote that ABBA's songs from Sweden are perfect for class work. Other good songs for learning English are songs by the Beatles and John Lennon, as well as Louis Armstrong's Wonderful World. Paul Cifuentes says Bob Marley's songs are amazing for teaching. Another teacher, Joseph Decca, says songs by Johnny Cash have always worked in his classroom. He says his students can hear the words, plus the songs often have stories. He also likes We Will Rock You by Queen and Beautiful Girls by Sean Kingston. He says young children love C is for Cookie by Cookie Monster from the TV show Sesame Street. Nina John Smith suggested these songs: It's My Life and We Weren't Born to Follow by Bon Jovi. Also, Nothing Else Matters by Metallica. Aurelio Lorenzo Costa Guzmão says he began to like English after his teacher played the Westlife song I Have a Dream. He wrote, "That was 8 years ago. I was in the 7th grade. And from that day on, my dream of improving my English skills became attached in my mind." Teachers can use this song to convey the message to their students that they should have their own dream for the future. Aurelio's story was no surprise to another commenter, Katya Kavenko. She especially likes songs by Michael Jackson and Queen. She wrote, "When you listen to your favorite songs, you feel emotionally high, and it moves you to action." For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Do you have any favorite songs for learning English? You can share other music suggestions for English learners at our website, voaspecialenglish.com, or on Facebook at VOA Learning English. We are also on Twitter and iTunes.
Music. The musicians perform versions of Western classical compositions and also traditional Afghan music. Violins and trumpets played along with the rubab and a sitar in a performance of Bolero by Maurice Ravel. The State Department and the United States Embassy in Kabul funded most of the trip. Secretary of State John Kerry called the young musicians ambassadors of peace. Afghanistan's former Taliban rulers banned music when they took power in 1996. Also, under the Taliban, girls were not permitted who had been denied admission to the University of Texas at Austin brought the case. Abigail Fisher argued that it was wrong to reject her when minority students with similar grades and test scores were accepted because of affirmative action. Wade Henderson is president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. He said the new decision confirms that race can be a factor in admissions. Ada Malloy is with the nonprofit American Council on Education. She says many schools do not generally give special consideration. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Reaction appears mixed to a recent United States Supreme Court decision on affirmative action in university admissions. Affirmative action in admissions means that schools give special consideration to some racial or ethnic minorities. The goal is to create a more diverse campus and to give more opportunities to groups that are underrepresented in higher education. The Supreme Court ruled that race can be one option to race or ethnicity, of applicants. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. The Afghan Youth Orchestra performed in the United States in February. 48 young musicians traveled from Kabul to play at some of the most famous American music halls. They performed at the Kennedy Center in Washington and Carnegie Hall in New York City. The last stop was Boston, Massachusetts, where they performed at the New England Conservatory of Many factors considered when a student applies to a college or university. The court said education benefits from having diverse student populations. Some legal experts thought the justices would strike down a 2003 Supreme Court ruling. That ruling let universities use race in admissions decisions, but as just one factor among others. In the new decision, the justices did not deal with the question of affirmative action itself. Instead, the justices sent the case back to a lower court for further consideration. A white woman